Lille jul, everyone! That is Danish for Merry Christmas. I wanted to share this time-lapse illustration with you of a Christmas-themed illustration that I did. It was supposed to be for my Christmas card this year, but I ended up doing another piece for that, so maybe I'll use this for next year's card. I'm working in Adobe Photoshop, and I'm working on a Wacom Cintiq 27 HD Touch. For brushes, I'm using Greg Rukowski's brushes. I'll leave a link down in the description so you can check those out. They're really good. It's my favorite. You can find them on Gumroad and I think on ArtStation as well. So when I start a new illustration, I will either start a sketch in my sketchbook, or as I'm doing here, I'm starting by sketching it in Photoshop. I work on several layers, so I'll do like a really crude underdrawing, then I'll draw on top of that, I'll fade it down, and I'll keep going that way until I have something that I like. Once the general idea is in place, I start blocking in colors. So for the last, I think 3-4 years, I've been doing a gnome illustration every year for Christmas. So I have a little collection of 5 different gnome illustrations now. I guess I will just keep going with that, so eventually I'm gonna have a whole little series of them. Gnomes are very traditional to Danish folklore. There are so many stories of gnomes either wreaking havoc or helping out families, like old folklore stories. So I grew up with a lot of really fun gnome stories, and also grew up believing in gnomes until, you know, about the time children stopped believing in Santa. So the Danish word for gnomes is nisse, and in Swedish and Norwegian they're known as tomten or tomtenisse. I think in English they're also known as brownies, they're known as hobgoblins, like there's a whole lot of names from them from all sorts of different regions. A lot of the folklore stories have commonalities, so it'll generally be like this little aging man who is in some way helping out someone. They're very fond of animals, especially horses and cats, and they were rumored to, if you didn't feed them porridge on Christmas Eve or up to Christmas, they would get really angry, and they might make the cows sick on a farm, or they might like burn the crop or something like that. So you really had to keep the gnome happy. They're little guardian spirits. Sometimes they would latch on to a family and just kind of help them out. As long as the family treated the gnome well, they would help them out. And I suspect many of you are probably going to be familiar with gnomes from Rien Portfilet. I don't know if that's pronounced correctly, or Will Hyen, who did the book on gnomes. It was also converted into an animated cartoon back in the early 90s, I think. It's a really charming book. It's beautifully illustrated, so if you're not familiar with it, I highly recommend checking it out. I'll leave a link to it down in the comments. So when I started this illustration out, I thought that the unicorn was going to be in a stable and the gnome is decorating it for Christmas. And then as I went along on the piece, I thought it might be really nice to make it a wintry setting, and it's wearing a St. Lucy's wreath or St. Lucy's crown. And St. Lucy's Day is on the 13th of December. And in Scandinavia, it's celebrated with a procession of girls dressed in white with a silver headband and carrying a candle. In front of the procession is a girl dressed up as St. Lucy who is wearing this wreath with 4 or 5 candles on. And then they're singing the song of St. Lucy. So it is to commemorate the saint, of course, from Christianity. Scandinavia is Lutheran Protestant. And it's also a festival of light, which Christmas used to be way back when. So it's bringing the light into the darkness because we're headed towards the darkest day of the year. A lot of my artwork, personal artwork, is folklore inspired, and I like to put like little symbols and, you know, childhood memories. It's just a fun thing to kind of inform your artwork. So as I'm painting the fur on the unicorn here, I'm trying to put in a lot of different colors. So when you paint white, even both for snow but also for fur or hair or anything, white is a very reflective color, so you should always put a lot of other colors in. So it could be like shades of gray or yellow or green, and the more you mix it up, the more vivid that white is going to be, because having all of those different shades just kind of, it makes it come together and makes it come alive. I like working in a very painterly fashion that way. Not just with white, actually, with any color. I just like, you know, mixing a lot of colors in and having all sorts of shades. You could get some really great lessons in that just from studying the colors of photos. Just make sure they're not photos that have been color manipulated too much, because then you don't get the colors that are true to nature. So early in the illustrations, I do the coloring more as kind of blocking in what the natural color of the item or the creature would be, And then later on, I'm going to go in with the multiply layer in Photoshop, which is on top of the drawing. And then I will darken up the areas where the shadow would be, and I'll brighten up the areas where the light would be. So currently the unicorn and the gnome is not really impacted by the light from the candle at all. It's just kind of like a neutral light coming from anywhere at this stage of the illustration. But that's going to change as I get a little further with it. Now I'm just working out the details of the unicorn horn and kind of going in and having some fun with the hair and making it very decorative. As imagining that the gnome is kind of like tying the hair in braids and tying it up around the horn and all to try to make it really pretty. So this is my first light pass on the piece, and again this is on a multiply layer, and then I go in on an overlay layer with a faint yellow, and that's what I use for pulling out the lights of the candle and just really making it shine. And then I start to like play around with, well, do I really want it all to be in such brown tones, or what if it was a wintry setting instead? So you see I was putting in snow there temporarily, and I kind of like what that looked like. And I was thinking about, oh, maybe it should have an aurora on top, but I ended up abandoning that because I didn't want the piece to get too complex. I do have a tendency when I'm making illustrations that I keep getting ideas and I'll just add more and more and more stuff in, and what is intended to be a short and simple illustration often ends up as like a full complex scene. And so I gotta really try to rein myself back when I'm working on pieces. Or rein myself in, I think it's called. And now I'm kind of adding some glow to the candles here and figuring out some details, smoothing out the horn a little bit, detailing the hair out again. Adding a lot of fluff. The fluffier the unicorn, the better. I am a firm believer of this. And then some red lace going up around the horn. So the idea with the carrot was to make the unicorn walk. The gnome has tied a carrot in front, like a carrot on a stick. So the unicorn is like, ah, food, yay! I like putting like little, scene thoughts like that into pieces when I'm working on them. Kind of imagine, what's the story going to be behind this? What's happening? What are the characters thinking? Why are they doing what they're doing? And what are their goals? And doing that, you can make some really fun little scenes. So some of the best advice I received from other illustrators when I was starting out was to act out your characters, especially when you're wanting to do illustration for books or stories, something like that. The storytelling has to be strong. So if you act out your characters, you can kind of find out how would they react, how would they be posed, what would they be thinking, how is that going to inform their appearance or what they're doing, or like the gestures they're making, anything like that. It's a good way to kind of really get into the meat of the illustration. You'll have to excuse my cat, he wants attention. So I'm going to put on some music for a little bit. For the next part of the illustration, I'm just going to be rendering out details on the mane and the hair and just kind of going in and tightening everything up. This illustration took about 8 hours all in all, and so it's sped up, I think, by 20 or so. So sped up quite a bit. It's really a benefit of working digitally that you can go in and resize and readjust at all times. As you can see throughout this illustration, I've had difficulties finding out exactly how I wanted his head to be, how large it should be. I've changed it several times. So it's so nice when you're working digitally that you can always go in and paint over, you can always go in and change things. So you don't have to commit to something 100%. On the other hand, it's also bad because it can make you very indecisive. Sometimes to make good artwork, you have to just commit to your brush strokes. You have to commit to like the choices you're making. So it's both a good and bad side of working digitally. So now I'm going to start experimenting with the setting a little bit. I know I want it to be a snowy, wintry setting, and I'm not quite sure about how to handle the snow. I tried just scattering around. Now I'm trying to like working in patterns, but I'm not loving the way the patterns look. It's too much, so I end up using a scatter brush instead and just kind of splattering it loosely around, and I think that it fits the scene better. It keeps focus more on the unicorn. Also trying out some glow around the candles, some sparkles, and then adjusting the colors a little bit. Again, this is just one of the big benefits of working digitally. You can experiment a lot. You can try out what looks good, what doesn't look good, without ruining your painting. Right now I'm trying out like how much snow is gonna actually hit the gnome and hit the unicorn. And the first pass of snow I did, I don't really like the way that looks, so I'm painting it out again, adjusting it. Here I'm going in and detailing his face a little bit, just making him look like a old man, because that's what gnomes are. Bringing some light back into his beard, and yeah. Last thing, signing my name on the piece, and last color pass just to make sure that those candles are really glowing in this winter scene, and here we have it. Thank you so much for watching, and a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to all of you. A special thanks to all of my patrons who are supporting my channel. You guys are amazing. I'm going to make this illustration available as a wallpaper download to all patrons, so enjoy. And I hope the rest of you have a wonderful winter holiday, whatever you're celebrating. Take care of yourself, hug your loved ones, and have a grand new year.